What is good, Defenders Nation, and welcome. You know what time it is. It's the night before a match, so it's time for one more sleep. This one, the League's Cup quarter-final edition. Everybody, welcome to a very familiar foe. Seattle Sounders, we all know what that means. Brian Schmetzer and company and LAFC have been the two league standard clubs in the Western Conference since 2018, since we began play in Major League Soccer. We know what we are going to get from Seattle. We just know they are good. They are compact. They are composed. And in this match, they are at home, a place where up until about the last couple matches, LAFC had not played well, but we seem to have turned that around on its head, and we are ready to go for the quarterfinal matchup against the Seattle Sounders tomorrow at 5 p.m. at Lumen Field. So make sure you've got your Apple TV ready. For those of you going up, make sure you have safe travels and everybody get home safely as well. Seattle, normally a pretty chill place to go see a match. They're probably going to have right around 30 or 40,000 strong there. I know the 3252 will likely be represented very well, but this is a match that we are looking forward to, and there's going to be a lot of the Seattle Sounders in our lives over the next couple of matches for sure. We know we're facing them in the semifinals of the U.S. Open Cup, and now we face them to get to the semifinals of League's Cup. So what does that mean? That means we have to talk about the Sounders now and for a whole bunch of times after that. Let's talk about how Seattle got here. Seattle's very, very good. During the course of the regular season, they've been okay. They're seventh right now, seventh in the West in Major League Soccer. That is not normal for Seattle, although if you know anything about Seattle, you know that what they like to do is close in a hurry. Every regular season for the past few, they have looked very, very good in August, September, October come playoff time. Not so great usually at the start. This one in a little bit bigger of a hole than they normally allow themselves. Again, seventh is still a playoff club, and they are not a playoff club that most teams want to play at any point during the road to MLS Cup. But how did they get here? Well, it's been a few good performances, and it's been a few not so inspiring performances for sure. But Seattle's League's Cup began with a 2-0 win over Minnesota. And that might seem like a really emphatic win. Minnesota, a solid team. But honestly, Minnesota went down a man 65 minutes in. They got a red card in the 65th. And it was only on two late goals. And really, one was because they had to open up after giving up a second. Two late goals scored by Seattle. An 87th minute goal by Jordan Morris and Paul Rothrock in the 4th minute of second half stoppage time. So it was kind of an uninspiring, but you know what? Doing what they have to do, an uninspiring, but okay, I guess, in the grand scheme of things, win for Seattle, beating Minnesota 2-0. Then they lose to Necaxa. That's right. Necaxa 3-1. We know what happened to Necaxa later in the tournament. But they lost to Necaxa 3-1, and more importantly, they lost after being up 1-0 in the 8th minute. They scored against Necaxa. Obed Vargas, who he is very, very good and very, very young. I think he's 18 or 19 years old. Really fun to watch. Obed Vargas, a very good player for them, scored in the 8th minute, but then could not hold on. Gave up goal after goal after goal. That's how Necaxa gets to 3. So a kind of an uninspiring loss. They kind of have to wait for the Minnesota-Necaxa match to see where things will shake out. And they get to the round of 32, and they wind up beating Carson. That's right. They beat a pretty good Carson team. And you guys all know, we don't say nice things about Carson on this podcast unless we absolutely have to. And look, we're going to be very real about this. Carson is a good team this year. Carson is the number 1 team in the West right now. There's no way around it. They're a very good team. And for about 85, 86 minutes, the Seattle Sounders had their way with Carson. They scored 3 goals in the first half, all 3 of their goals in the first half, and looked dominant in doing so. It was a late goal by Gabriel Peck, who made it 3-1, but really this was an excellent victory for Seattle. They only possessed the ball 43% of the time, and really the second half, they were in full bunker mode, rarely going forward at all. It was a really fun match to watch, actually. And Carson couldn't do anything against them, really, for most of the second half. So a very, very good victory there, and a solid 4-0 victory against Pumas. Pumas, that was actually a rematch, Seattle and Pumas, for the Champions League final, I think, in 2022. And I think at that point, I don't know, Pumas was playing rather uninspired soccer. They really didn't give much resistance to Seattle. But look, anytime a club beats another club 4-0, you have to stand up and take notice. And anytime a Liga MX club goes down 4-0 to any MLS club, you do have to stand up and take notice. So what does that mean? That means they're kind of trending in the right direction, right? With the win against Galaxy 3-1 and the win against Pumas 4-0, you got to be thinking they're riding a high going into this match. The other thing to look at, the other thing to remember, is they have had 7 goal scorers over the course of their 4 matches. And that's really typical of a Seattle club. And getting goals from places you might not think they would get goals. I believe Yeimar scored a goal for them. Again, Obed Vargas, not a huge goal scorer, but he got one. Paul Rothrock has 2. Albert Rusnak has 1. We'll talk more about Rusnak in a minute. Jordan Morris with 3 goals for them in Leagues Cup. This is a club that gets goals from a bunch of different places. Alex Roldan, I think, had 1 as well. So they're getting goals from places that you would like to see some auxiliary goals or some ancillary goals come from. And that's a good thing for Seattle. 7 different goal scorers. Raul Ruidiaz, not one of those. And we'll talk for a second about Raul Ruidiaz. Look, I'll talk about Albert Rusnak in a second. Don't forget for 1 minute about Jordan Morris. And it's not like you can forget about Seattle's most prolific goal scorer of all time. Actually, is it him? I think it's him, right? Is it Jordan Morris or is it Raul Ruidiaz? I have to go back and look. But either way, Jordan Morris has 13 goals and 4 assists in 30 matches across all competitions this season. 13 goals, 4 assists. You got to stand up and take notice when Jordan Morris is on the pitch. He's a U.S. men's national team camp guy every single time they call guys in. We know how good Jordan Morris is. I don't need to sit here and educate LAFC faithful who've been watching this club for the last few years or since we started in 2018 about how good Jordan Morris is. He's very, very good. But another name that you might want to pay a little bit of attention to is Paul Rothrock. Paul Rothrock with 5 goals and 3 assists across all competitions, and 2 of those goals coming in Leagues Cup. He's another one of those next man up kind of guys. I mean, we see it with Jackson Reagan. We see it with Obed Vargas. We see it with Paul Rothrock. These guys just kind of come up through Seattle's system and you just plug them right in. I mean, that's the thing about Jackson Reagan, right? He's been a little banged up this season, but he actually went over to the Olympics. He was the alternate for Team USA during the Olympics. Jackson Reagan and Yeimar Gomez Andrade, 2 of the biggest center backs you will see in Major League Soccer. And those 2 provide a serious presence in the middle between Yeimar and Jackson Reagan. So just a couple of guys that you want to make sure you look at. The other thing that's a big question mark, at least according to Brian Schmetzer, but I don't think it is. I think Schmetzer is just playing a little mind games with LAFC and trying to scout them. Stefan Fry has not played since LAFC beat Seattle 3-0 at Lumen Field on July 20th. July 20th being their last MLS regular season match, which means it's been all Andrew Thomas in goal for these 4 Leagues Cup matches. Now, Schmetzer still says, beyond a shadow of a doubt, Stefan Fry is their number 1. He's the captain when he's out there. He gets the armband. And we're very familiar with Stefan Fry against LAFC. He's had great moments, and he's been absolutely terrible at times as well. But will it be Andrew Thomas in goal? Again, he's played in all 4 Leagues Cup matches. He's got 2 clean sheets. He's given up 4 goals in 4 matches. Not terrible. 3 of them to Necaxa. And again, kind of a weird, uninspired match that Seattle had played. I think they knew they were already kind of in after that win against Minnesota. But Andrew Thomas versus Stephen Fry, what do I think will happen? I think it'll be Andrew Thomas. I think they're going to ride the hot hand. What's up, Sal? I think they're going to ride the hot hand. I think they're going to stick with Andrew Thomas during Leagues Cup. I think they might stick with Andrew Thomas, maybe even in the semi of the Open Cup. I don't know. I expect to see Stephen Fry in that Open Cup match, if I'm being honest. But I think they stick with Andrew Thomas in goal. Either way, Stephen Fry, Andrew Thomas. Stephen Fry is an all-time very, very good MLS goalkeeper. That's kind of a backhanded compliment. I know, I get it, right? When Nick Raimondo is your best keeper in league history, is that him being as good as Martin Brodeur, or him just sticking around for forever and compiling wins like other goalies have, right? I know I made a hockey reference. I get it. But either way, real quick, I want to answer Giancarlo's question. I have to go back. Giancarlo asks, Scarf, if we win at Seattle and Club America beat Colorado, would we play at home? I just need to check the Leagues Cup bracket, and I'm going to do that for you in just a second. So don't worry. I will have that answer for you, providing I can just get their standings. Oh, this is very frustrating. Let's take a look. I'll take a look for you, and I'll find out. But either way, squirrel, can't get distracted. We're talking about Andrew Thomas. Now, there are two big injury questions coming into this match. Two big injury questions, not for LAFC yet. I'll talk about LAFC in just a second. But no, more importantly, for Seattle Sounders. And one of those is Raul Ruidiaz. Now, we all know Raul Ruidiaz. He's not that Raul Ruidiaz anymore. That's for sure. He's just not as good as he once was, but he can be as good once as he ever was and has been for quite some time in Major League Soccer this season. What do I mean by that? He has 8 goals on the season, but the dude barely plays. He doesn't start anymore. He's not their frontline guy. So it's something where he's having to come off the bench. And score goals. And it's not something he's done in Leagues Cup. He's only played 13 minutes in Leagues Cup. Now, again, he still has 8 goals in Major League Soccer, but he's barely played in Leagues Cup. He was injured for the first 2 matches. He was unavailable. He was injured in one of the matches, but was unavailable in one of the other 2. He was available last match and didn't play. So I don't know what you're going to get from Raul Ruidiaz. But what we do know is he can score against LAFC. He can score against LAFC. He's got 5 goals against us. So that's an injury concern. He didn't play last match, but he was available. Maybe they were holding him to give him minutes in this one. The other big one is one of their big designated players, Pedro de la Vega. Pedro de la Vega, a player who seems to be bit by the injury bug several different times this season. Yes, the same Pedro de la Vega who scored against LAFC on opening night. He got their only goal when we beat them 2-1. And a lot was expected of Pedro de la Vega. Well, since that match, he's only played less than 260 minutes for all competitions for the entire rest of the season. And I'll get to Club America because I have your answer in a minute. The question about Pedro de la Vega, he sustained a hamstring injury against Necaxa and wasn't available for the next 2 matches. But according to Brian Schmetzer, he says he's excited because he passed his last physical tests. So will he be available? Potentially. Will he take the pitch? I don't know. Again, I think there's a lot of gamesmanship going on with Brian Schmetzer because he wants us to maybe potentially scout and plan for Pedro de la Vega playing, and then we'll see what happens after that. Now, let's talk about what happens just in case when we win and then Club America wins. Let's be very clear about this. Club America is the number 1 seed in the tournament. So they have home field hosting privileges. And I do believe, and I'll have to double check this, I do believe if we win and Club America wins against Colorado, that the semifinal match will be played at Dignity Health Sports Park. That is what I believe to be the case. Now, I think it'd be really cool if they moved it to like SoFi or something. We can get a rematch against Club America at SoFi. That would be fun. But I really, from what I understand, either way, we will not host against Club America. We will not host. They are the higher seed. We are, if you break down all of the seedings, we are 15th in the seeding breakdown. Seattle is 13th, which is why they're hosting at Lumen. Colorado, again, I have to look at how they did the standings. Colorado's 46th, which is a lot worse than 15. So if Colorado wins, they come down here to BMO. We play Colorado at BMO. But if America wins and we advance past Seattle, then it looks like we may be playing at Carson. I have to double check. I mean, that place is a hub of activity down there. I think they have challenger tennis or something going on down there at some point. I don't know. But either way, I think it's one of those things where we are going to be on the road if it's Club America, and I think it's in Carson. And if it's home, it'll be BMO. So with all that being said, we talked about injury questions. We've talked about how Seattle got there. We know how we got there. The very exciting part was Olivier Giroud debuting in the 71st minute. So let's talk about our players to watch. And this one, kind of a no-duh, right? I feel a little like Philly's pick sometimes. And Philly, we miss you, buddy. Currently in Paris, taking pictures with the Eiffel Tower and everything. He's enjoying himself. Philly, we miss you, buddy. But I've got my Mineragua here. I know you would rather have Topo Chico, and I know you're in Paris right now, so I hope you're enjoying yourself, bud. My player to watch for LAFC is Denis Bouanga because, duh. That's why you buy a ticket to go see a guy like Denis Bouanga. Now, why isn't my player to watch Olivier Giroud? Because I don't think Olivier Giroud is going to have as big of an impact in this match as a Denis Bouanga, as a Matty Boguc, as a Kiki Oliveira, just because it's early. Everybody relax. Everything will be fine. Everything is great. But I just think that still he's not there yet. We saw what happened. We saw what happened in the last match. Denis Bouanga, Matty Boguc, whoever was out there with him, really tried to feed Olivier Giroud maybe a little bit more than they should have. So what does that mean? That means they're just going to have to figure out how to work him in more fluidly into the offense. I think it'll be totally fine, but I don't think Olivier will have a massive impact on this match at all. I think Denis Bouanga has a massive impact as soon as he steps on the pitch. And the player to watch for Seattle is Albert Rusnak. Albert Rusnak is very, very good again. He went through a couple of seasons, both in Seattle and in Real Salt Lake, and then last year with Seattle, where he was underperforming, to say the least. Well, this season, 13 assists to go with 5 goals in 28 matches across all competitions. He's excellent, and I mean excellent on set pieces. He is excellent in transition with his crosses and delivering the ball. He is absolutely someone to watch for sure. For sure. Albert Rusnak is the best playmaker that Seattle has, and that's saying a lot because, again, De La Vega is hurt. Raul Ruidiaz isn't Raul Ruidiaz anymore. Joao Paulo will not be playing in this match. He's out for the season. They've dealt with a good amount of injuries, Seattle has. So I think the emergence of Albert Rusnak as a top-flight playmaker once more has been a massive, massive thing for Seattle. So clearly, to me, he is the player to watch because he'll find Jordan Morris in space. He'll find Obed Vargas in space. He'll find some of those other players. Giancarlo, it would all depend on what happens on the other side. I will look for you in just a second. Give me 1 second. I'll try and find all that out. But I didn't go that far down the rabbit hole in terms of would we host if we have the final. But I think so. But we'll take a look. Let's talk about my keys to the match. The first is we have to match Seattle's start. Seattle tends to start very quickly at home. They scored an 8th-minute goal against Necaxa. They've scored early goals throughout this tournament and throughout this season because they are just a quick starting team, especially at home. So what do we have to do? We have to match their start, and it can be tough. The ball moves differently on turf than it does on grass, and every team has to get used to playing on turf instead of playing on grass. And that might seem kind of like a no-duh kind of thing, but that's the tough part, right? uh, you have to get used to it on the fly, which can be really, really difficult. And frankly, it's something that LAFC hasn't played on turf a whole bunch. Omar is exactly right, by the way. I was gonna say that, Omar. I like it. You're quick because I got to do all the talking, and you're in the chat. I love it. Take a look at Omar's comment because he's correct down there about who we would host and who we would go on the road to. But we have to match their start. Second key to the match, John Wooden said it, and in memory of Bill Walton, who used to say this all the time as well, I think it's going to be a quick thing, an important thing for LAFC too, is to be quick, but don't hurry. Now, what do I mean by that? We have to play with speed, but we can't get out over our skis. We can't try and move the ball so quickly that we're not looking at moving it with purpose and intentionality. There are times where we tend to play a little bit too fast. Sometimes Kiki Oliveira gets a little sped up, or sometimes Deniba Wanga tends to want to do a little bit too much on the wing instead of maybe waiting for a runner or two. Now, it's not something we've done very often recently. We've done very well at slowing the match down, but then speeding it up on our own terms. But again, I just worry about turf. It can be one of those things where on turf, maybe, potentially, we try and speed ourselves up quickly, and it winds up being too much of a hurry, and instead of playing quick with intentionality. So we'll see what happens there. It's extremely important that we possess the ball, we control the ball, but we also control the tempo of the match. So many times people look at the bottom line on possession, or they look at the bottom line on shots or shots on target. And you know what? Sometimes those can be important. But we've won matches with 30-something% of possession this year, and we've lost matches with 60-something% of possessions this year. My buddy Mike. What's up, Mike? How are you, bud? So it's one of those things that we have to look at. Turf is always tough, okay? And I think this is going to be a fun one. It's not quite to the level of Carson and LAFC, but matches against Seattle just tend not to disappoint for one side or the other, right? So I think this is going to be one of those things where you set your clock, you sit yourself down, you maybe have your beverage or your food sitting right there alongside of you, and you know you're not getting up for 45 minutes. You know you're not getting up for the entire first half because there's going to be something to watch wall to wall. Now, maybe at halftime, you go replenish your dip, you get a new bag of chips, you pop open an extra beverage or two, whatever it might be. Maybe you got a little cooler right next to you because, you know, you're prepping for these kind of things. But this is a strap yourself in and get going because it is going to be fun kind of a match. I really do believe that this is going to be a Leagues Cup classic. I think that these two teams are playing some of their best soccer of the season right now. And they also, look, we know we're the two best teams in the Western Conference since we've come into the league. Brian Schmetzer is an excellent coach. Steve Cherundolo is ready to go. And I think it's going to be a close one. But ultimately, I think that it's 3-2 LAFC. And I think that we move forward on to the semifinals where we'll play the winner of the Club America Colorado match. Now that we got all that away, because you guys want to talk about it so quickly, let's talk about potential scenarios. If Colorado wins and we win, this is all if we win, right? Or when we win, I should say. Colorado comes down to BMO and the semifinals are at BMO. If Club America wins, like we've talked about, there's a very real chance that that match is at Dignity Health Sports Park down in Carson because their home hub is Carson should they host a match. Now, let's look at the other side. The other side of the bracket, I know this is getting ahead of ourselves, but look, you guys want to talk about it, so we'll spend 2 seconds talking about it. Philadelphia plays Mazatlan, and Columbus Crew plays NYCFC. Philadelphia is the 9 seed. Columbus is the 6 seed. So if either Philadelphia or Columbus is the team remaining on the other side of the bracket, Philadelphia or Columbus hosts the match. So we're either going to Philly or we're going back to Columbus. But if the other two teams, Mazatlan or NYCFC, wind up representing the other side of the bracket, then very simply, we host either Mazatlan or NYCFC. That's the bottom line. But first, before we do any of that, we've got to get through Seattle in Seattle. and then potentially either Colorado at home or Club America in Carson, which, I mean, look, I want to see Club America. I want to see Brian Rodriguez as much as the next person, just so I can watch someone slide tackle Brian. But it's going to be an interesting environment, guys, if it's Club America. We already saw what Carson looked like with all of the Chivas fans down there. It's going to look very interesting if Club America gets to play in Carson, because we all know how many Club America fans there are in Los Angeles, and not far, 2.5 hours down the road, how many might want to come over the border and see them play in Carson. It's going to be interesting. I'm selfishly rooting for Colorado just because I don't think Colorado is as good as we are, clearly. And I think Club America can play with us step for step. So I'd love to see Colorado with the upset. I know many of you watching would much rather see Club America, and I get it. I understand why. We'll do a whole getting to know you episode on Club America if they do it, because they're a Liga MX opponent, not an MLS opponent. And look, I'll be honest. I'm hoping for Mazatlan. I'm hoping for NYCFC, not just because they're the lower seeds, and I think Philadelphia and Columbus are very good. I think Columbus and Philadelphia are very good, but I just want to host. I want to host the Leagues Cup final. I think it would be absolutely incredible. And I think by that time, Philly will be back, so maybe I don't have to talk the entire time. But I can't tell you guys how much I appreciate all the support in the chat, how much I appreciate all the support on Twitter, on Facebook, on Instagram, everywhere you guys come to support. Thank you, thank you, thank you. You guys are absolutely incredible. Love, love, love doing this for all of you out there. You make this worth it for me. So to recap, I've got us winning 3-2. Players to watch, Denny Bawanga and Albert Rusnak. And with that, y'all, don't forget, like, subscribe, turn on notifications, head on over to defendersofthebank.com, go to our shop, buy a t-shirt, buy something else that's cool. I don't know, buy your baby a onesie if you have a baby out there. If you don't have a baby to buy a onesie for, buy one for someone else's baby. Why not? We love you guys so much. We'll see you guys in 2 days for our episode on the win against Seattle that we were just talking about here. Bye-bye.